Welcome to One of Ones, presented by FLOLiO. I'm your host, Jeremy Weber, and I am joined, as always, by my friend over in the Netherlands, Dan Vondelok. Dan, how we doing today?
Doing good, doing good. It's like we mentioned before the show. We had a rough weekend with the other side, so it's been juicy looking at all the Twitter drama and stuff.
Too much drama, so, today feels like a good day to focus on something even better than drama, which is some really great art. We are excited to have Chris Hytha on the show with us today. Chris is a architect from Philadelphia who is also a great NFT creator. He has projects on Foundation, Super Rare. He's a creator of Rowhomes, Highrises, and has a really awesome photography collection from a bike trip he took across the US. So without further ado, let's bring Chris on and we can jump right into it. Chris, welcome to the show.
What's up, guys? Happy
Hello.
to be here. So just
Good to
a
have you on.
minor
Oh, did I
fix
get your
on the
name wrong?
intro. Us architecture professionals, like you can't call someone an architect until they're licensed. So just
Oh,
for
yeah.
Oh, okay.
clarity, I just graduated from architecture school, not a licensed
Okay.
architect, but
So
one day.
is,
Okay.
is, is there a way how you call someone like do you call them a architect in training, practicing architect or?
It depends on the firm. I was a design professional at my
Hmm.
previous architecture job, so it's like architectural intern, architectural designer. It's another one, but architect is like the official title
Oh, yeah.
that's
Okay.
reserved. So.
Are you studying for that? Like, is there a big exam to officially become an architect?
Yeah, so after you graduate school, then you have to complete a certain amount of working hours, which I nearly completed while I was in school, and then you have to take a series of 6 different tests, and they're quite grueling. And I have classmates that are going through that now, but I'm distracted with NFTs, so I
Yeah.
haven't dove into that yet.
And then did I get your last name right?
Yeah, that was perfect.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was wondering, like, do you know the origin of your last name by any chance?
Yeah, it's Bohemian actually.
Wow.
So that region in the Czech Republic. I mean, that's very distant, but that's where the name comes from.
Interesting. Yeah. Like it doesn't look very, you know, like like English or something, right?
Hmm.
So yeah,
Okay.
interesting. Very cool. Very cool. And you are a FAA certified drone pilot, correct?
I am, yes. So I did that specifically for my project Highrises,
Wow.
because to sell images taken by drone, you need to be licensed, and a lot of
Really?
people try to get away
Wow.
with that. And there's a lot of people that sell drone photos and aren't licensed, and that's a dangerous thing to do. Even though they don't explicitly say like NFTs because they're so new,
Hmm.
you're selling that photo and making money, so you definitely need to be licensed for that. So just a warning for all the drone pilots out there.
Yeah, and I just want
Okay.
to add, you seem very like on top of things, right? So I looked through everything, and like on your YouTube, everything is like credited. Everything is like, and you got a LLC, right? Did I say that correctly? Like,
Yep.
could you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a very recent development. I mean, honestly, getting into NFTs has led me to take my business a lot more seriously.
Hmm.
One, because now I have like the funds to invest and to set up an LLC and to set up a business bank account and track business expenses, all this stuff. Yeah, it's like it's a new world for me. I mean, prior to NFTs, it just wasn't serious enough to care. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think the IRS is gonna care if I'm selling prints for like $100 here
Hmm.
and there. But definitely when I now that I'm full time in NFTs, I felt like it was time to formalize things. Uh, it's not fun. It's like the side of being a freelance artist that
Yeah.
no one likes to talk about.
So that transitions perfectly. Like, what got you into NFTs? Were you into crypto before? Like, how did you get introduced to them and begin putting your work out there?
So being like a photographer, digital artist, you know, early last summer slash spring, I had a lot of friends that just reached out and said like, "Hey, you should look into this. Like, it looks like your work might do well here." So I got 3 or 4 of those messages, and I like created an OpenSea, created my MetaMask, and like then kind of forgot about it, didn't take it very seriously. Then it wasn't until a couple photographer friends in Philly that I know got really heavily into it. And my friend Josh Pellegrini, Travel Pell on Instagram and Twitter, sold his first NFT for like 2.5 ETH. And at that moment, I was like, oh, this is serious. And like people that I know, people in my circle are using this new technology to, finance their art.
Hmm.
So, why can't I? And that was really the start.
That's
And why
awesome.
Philly? Like it might seem like a very obvious question, but like I'm just interested like to hear like what is the connection between Philly and you?
I grew up right outside of the city. So it's always been like my home city. And I went to college at Drexel University, which is right basically in downtown Philadelphia and West Philadelphia. So I've lived in West Philly now for a little over 6 years. So yeah, it's my home. A natural fit for the first NFT project.
Dan's making his. Is this your first trip to the U.S. coming up, Dan?
Yeah, I'm visiting Dallas coming
Yes.
next 3 weeks.
We may need Dan to stop off in Philly and visit a Wawa and get a cheesesteak and everything, just so he gets the full experience.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you got to come visit. Check out
yeah,
some of the row homes.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've got a bunch of homes here as well, but ours are like very like neatly manufactured, factory built. You know, like very like one of one. No, not one of one, but like they're all like direct copies of each other, so they're
Yeah.
not very unique.
So the opposite of one of one.
Yeah, exactly. The one of very very many.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay. So when you first got into this, you had already been working on your row homes project before discovering NFTs.
So the actual collection was made just for NFTs, which I think
Okay.
set it apart. It was like this crazy
Mm.
week where I had nothing else, no other obligations because I had just graduated school and I was still looking for jobs. So I had all the time in the world. So the collection itself, only one of the images was taken like back in 2020, prior to NFTs. The rest were taken for the project. But the idea and like the graphic style and the flat composition, all that had been kind of developing for the past 4 years at least. On my Instagram, I think even in like 2018, 2017, there was a very similar image that's a row home straight on. So it definitely has roots much earlier.
That was one of the things that definitely drew my eye to it. Like I just remember seeing, scrolling Twitter and seeing one of the row homes that somebody posted on there, and I started to dive deeper from there. And like that, your style of art, I think, is really cool. The that combination, because I was looking at your description of it on your site, and you can talk about it more, but just that blend of photography and digital art, I think, is really unique and sets it apart.
Hmm.
What kind of inspired that?
So one of the big inspirations, just in general in NFTs, really was Alejandro Cartagena's Carpoolers. That's a project that was very early. One of the more successful photography collections, and what I learned from it is this idea of consistency with interesting variables. So, like for a collection to be recognizable as a collection, there needs to be some level of consistency. And for
Hmm.
carpoolers as well as row homes, it was consistency and composition. So for his, it's always like top down looking at a truck. So the consistency is that frame. There's a truck bed, and the variables are what's happening in that truck bed. Sometimes there's like five, different guys in the back. Sometimes it's one guy with a shovel and a newspaper over his head, or there's like a bunch of lawn mowers and other things. So with that, right when you see a top-down view of a truck, it's carpoolers. Same deal with row homes. Like
Yeah.
they're all very consistent. So like when you see a row home, just because of the colors, because of the composition, the way it's framed, and the way it's edited. And then within that, though, there's all these fun variables. Each house is a different color, has different details, has different brickwork or ivy growing, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I love how the background is like very similar to the house itself. You know.
Hmm. Yeah. In the editing process, each of them, I like isolate the house from the background, and then I literally start by just sampling a color from the house. So
Mm.
maybe if it's like an orange house with like blue painted windows, I might choose that blue color of the window to make the sky. So then, yeah, the whole scene is just very aesthetic, and it ties the scene together through color.
Yeah, it's very, very like you can like you mentioned. It's very whenever you see a row home, you're like, oh, like this is a row home. Like if you know what it is, then instantly you're like, all right, this is a row home. I
Mhm.
think that's very like it deserves some, definitely some credit, because I think it's great. I love it.
Do you offhand have a particular one in the collection that is the most meaningful to you, or your favorite one that we could kind of pull up and maybe talk about a little bit?
Yeah, probably number 65. That one's
Number
very
65.
fun.
Okay.
Yep.
Let me see if OpenSea will cooperate at the moment. It is not on my computer, at least.
See if I can pull it up. If yours is struggling.
And just to make a note on that previous comment about like if the work is recognizably part of the series or if it's recognizable that it's your work, I think that's one of the most important things of being an artist in general to be able to
Mm-hmm.
differentiate yourself in that way. But also that applies to NFTs as well. And I think that is like a necessary characteristic for anyone who's very
Yeah.
successful in the space. And it's a good check too if you're an artist, looking at your work compared to your friend's work. What is it that makes yours unique? And sometimes it's harder. I think using digital art and using Photoshop and creating my own editing techniques is a great way to differentiate my work. It becomes a lot harder when you're doing like landscape. I have a lot of landscape photography friends, and how is one person's shot of Yosemite different from another? They're
Yeah.
good questions to ask yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And it's uh something, because I like I'm by no means an artist, right? Like I can't draw for like anything. Like I can't draw for shit. And it's really like cool that you're so consistent with your art, at least. Like do you cross reference your own art, like whenever you create like a new piece?
Yeah, so it was interesting doing the Rowhomes project because it was the first time that I made such like a cohesive collection. Prior to this, I was just walking around Philly
Yeah.
taking photos. But they had a common thread of the editing style. But with Rowhomes, it was kind of like I edited the first four, and then on the fifth one, maybe I had a different idea about how it would aesthetically look, and then I had to go back to the first four and re-edit those to match that
Uh,
one, and then it developed further. After the 10th one, then I had to go back and re-edit. So it was definitely an iterative process where it wasn't like I just came up with it and then just made 100. I
yeah.
learned along the way.
Yeah. And have you ever thought about making like a generative project?
A little bit. I mean, with row homes and with high rises too, I recognize the opportunity in that
Mm-hmm.
because I shot them so consistently. I was always certain distance away from the house and at a perfect angle and in consistent lighting. I could totally, take a window from one home and create that as an asset. Take the cornice and use it as an asset, and then mix and match and generate 10,000
Yeah.
row homes. Um, I think that possibility is there, but the question is why.
Yeah.
Um, I think one of the most compelling things about the project is that these homes are real physical objects out in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of what makes them special. And I feel like generating them, you miss out on that.
Mm.
And also rarity. If I only have 100 of the real authentic ones, making 10,000 more would just desaturate or just saturate the market.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And like, who are you to say that one house is more rare than the other, for example? And yeah, just I wonder why, like, architecture. Like it seems like a pretty interesting interest, especially like these row homes. Like,
Hmm.
could you maybe like say, like, tell us something a little bit more about like your architecture?
Sure. Yeah, I felt very lucky early in life. When I started high school was when I like set my mind on architecture because
Mm-hmm.
I just found myself like sketching buildings and drawing elevations, and I got really into Minecraft, which
Oh,
led
there you
me to
go.
like drawing out like castles or mansions or whatever that I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
build. And then I realized like, oh, I'm literally just doing architecture, designing buildings, so why not get formally trained in that if it's something I love already? So I've been drawing for since the beginning of high school, and honestly, the roots in architectural drawing definitely inspire like the digital art side of things as well. But yeah, long story short, I knew I was into it from an early age, and I loved architecture school too. It was, one of the most exciting like times of growth in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Super challenging, and it just pushed me in a lot of new ways. And even though now I might not become an architect because art has done so well, I don't think I'd be here without architecture school.
Yeah. So I was wondering, do you like would you label yourself as in like a quote unquote artist, or do you have different types of like tags you would slap on yourself?
I usually say photographer, digital artist. Um, I think I don't know, it's an interesting conversation about photography, and like some people might not want to say photography at all because like a lot, my work is
Like
so
yeah,
digitally augmented. But at the same time, like it is photography. I bike around with a camera and find these things and take photos of them. So I feel like leaving photography out wouldn't do it justice either.
Were you really interested in, the Philadelphia architecture before you went into school for it? Like, has that always been kind of a thing, or did your appreciation for it grow significantly more once you got into school?
Well, from an early age, like growing up outside of the city, I would go into downtown Philadelphia at least a couple times a year. And as a young kid, like seeing skyscrapers, like undoubtedly inspired me to go into architecture just because they're like marvels. And as a kid, even now, I look at them and I'm like, how the heck did they make those things? And that curiosity led me to like want to learn about it. Definitely, that is like the nugget, the root of the Highrises project, because big buildings, like from as long as I can remember, when I see a massive like stone building like City Hall in Philadelphia, I'm just blown away. Um, then the row home stuff, I grew up in like not technically a row home. It was built to be a twin, where two would be smashed up next to each other, and the
mm-hmm.
twin was never made. But it's like a long linear house similar to row homes. And in the town I grew up in, it was full of row homes, and my parents were into like property management and reviving old properties. So they would buy these properties that were abandoned, falling apart, and they'd fix up the porches and fix up the facades. So that was a big inspiration early on too, because like my dad would like show me these houses that he was fixing up, and it led to a greater appreciation of like architectural details. Then when I moved to Philly, like currently I'm in a West Philly row home that I helped renovate. I did the architectural plans for it. It had been abandoned for 20 years, so we, like recovered the whole facade and maintained a lot of the historic details. So I feel like I've just lived and breathed row homes for as long as I've been in Philadelphia.
That's very cool. I know on your site it also mentioned that some of the money from the project has gone into help restoring some architecture in Philly. Have you been able to see that come to life since you started it?
Not directly, but yeah, I made donations to the Preservation Alliance, which is a group
Cool.
that identifies historic structures that are important to maintain, and then also to Pathways to Housing, which isn't directly about the properties, but more so, when a property becomes abandoned, that can sometimes be because someone can't afford property tax, or they're, kicked out, or they just can't afford to maintain the house and keep it safe to occupy, and then they can't live it in anymore. So Pathways to Housing helps house people experiencing homelessness. So I feel like it's also well in line with the project. But I'm working on a couple exciting things right now regarding the Row Homes project. And there's a possibility to do a block build eventually. I'm still, in the early phases of planning this, but there are these groups that will organize volunteers and then over like the span of a week, go and just fix up like the facades and like front porches of a whole block in,
Wow.
a neighborhood that needs some work. So, integrating something like that into the project is super exciting. And, the idea of doing a before and after image of like an image of a block that's in desperate need of repair. And then that generates a bunch of money to make it happen. And then, airdrop the next image that's that same block all fixed up. And it's a very interesting like opportunity to tie NFTs, which are these like floaty ethereal things, like who knows
Yeah.
what they are, to real change and like brick and mortar.
That is a super cool idea. Like, I think that's really awesome. I'd love to. Yeah, that'd be great to see that come to fruition, man. I like that a lot. I the High Rises project. That's your most recent one, and it looks like you're planning on going across the country and expanding on that. What what inspired that one? I know you said when you were a kid you love seeing these huge high rises. Have you picked out your cities you want to go to, and kind of what inspired those choices?
Yeah, there's a ton of information on the website as far as which cities, but pretty much all the major cities across the USA. And one of the big things that inspired this is with modernism came this like dread and hatred of ornamentation. So like when you think of a modern high rise, you think of just like all glass, right? There's no
Mm.
carving, there's no stonework, there's no like little intricate details, there's no gargoyles. And in my experience working in architecture, um, honestly, so I worked for 3 years in architecture and I designed a high rise. It was like 11 stories, 10 stories. And we designed it super cool. And then the client, like, they didn't have the budget for it. So they cut it down and cut it down and cut it down until there was like no design left. And it was just a boring building. And that left a bitter taste in my mouth because you realize that everyone's just about the bottom line now.
Yeah.
So with the Highrises project, I am focusing on historic architecture, all like Art Deco, kind of between 1890 to 1940s, because it was a very different era, very, very different way of building because labor was so cheap. You could lay bricks, like with the Empire State Building, it's just all bricks, hundreds of stories, maybe not hundreds of stories, however many stories tall the Empire State Building is. But they spared no expense. There are these like crazy ornate details hundreds of feet above the street where no one realistically is expected to even see them. So to me, it's just like a whole different level of pride and excitement. And most of these buildings were made by kind of a, I don't know, odd component of these high rises. Usually it's just some rich dude who made his money in oil or trains or coal, whatever. I don't know. It's always a different story, but they just want to preserve their legacy in the form of a building, and they spare no expense. They just want it to be the most badass building possible because they want their legacy to live on. So the fact that it's like tied to the ego of these like billionaires is a little off-putting to me, but the fact that we have these beautiful buildings that we can all appreciate and that contribute to like the cities that we all live in, I think is a positive thing. So
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I was wondering, so Rowhomes you just did with your camera, right? But High Rises was with a drone. Did that take a lot of adjustment from your side? I mean.
yeah, it's definitely a process. I mean, honestly, just before this call, I was diving into some more like FAA stuff because I want to go to Boston, but there are these airspace restrictions, and it's a whole new level of complexity. And then the level of just safety in cities, like flying from the street. It can be dangerous just because I'm not aware of my surroundings because I'm looking at the drone, I'm looking at my photos. So it's hard to be aware, and when you're not aware is when like you can have problems. So yeah, definitely a lot of complexity, and then just the images themselves I need to stitch together in Photoshop, so it's not just one single image, it's like 10 to 12 raw files that are stitched manually, so the edits take 2 to 3 times longer than Rowhomes as well.
Wow. Have you ever had someone like freak out because you're like flying your drone or anything?
Not yet.
Okay.
No,
Bless.
I usually fly. I try to fly for sunrise mostly because the winds are very.
Oh, speaking about winds, it looks like the connection has been blown away. Oh, hey, there you go. You're
Yeah,
back.
sorry,
You're
I
back.
lost you for a minute there.
You're good.
But yeah, no one's gotten too mad with the drone stuff. I try to fly when not many people are out. Like I said, at sunrise because the lighting's good, winds are lower, less people out. It's a good time to fly.
Sweet. And so it's interesting because I looked at the website and it's a the team is larger than people would like initially think, right?
Yeah. One of the really cool parts of the project is the team I've been able to build around the project. Rowhomes is almost all me,
Mm-hmm.
but with the Highrises project, I just have these bigger ambitions, and I just want to like flesh this out as much as possible. It's not just the images. I'm working with an
Yeah.
author who's digging into old newspaper archives to like uncover the stories of these buildings, why they're
Wow.
built. The rich businessmen that built them. What the buildings symbolize. So that's really interesting, and it just adds depth to each of these buildings. And then there's also a web developer. My friend Andy did a great job on the website. We worked back and forth on that for a long time, just to create something really interesting and fun, and a way to search through the buildings. So you can search by
Yeah.
attribute, and you can see
Very
all the high
cool.
rises with clock towers, or you can search by spires, or by the decade, or by the architectural style. So now again, it's not just photos, but it's this resource cataloging these buildings through all their different attributes.
That's awesome. So just to backtrack real quick, OpenSea is finally, cooperating with me here. So I want to pull up Rowhome 65. That was the one that you mentioned, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. So this one's really awesome. So talk us through this a little bit. Some of the details, what you like so much about it, and yeah.
Yeah, so some of the homes I found on Google Earth before going out there, because you can see a lot more,
Yeah.
just virtually with the 3D modeled Google Earth world, than I can just biking out. But all the homes kind of are a mix between me just aimlessly biking through West and North Philadelphia, and just stumbling upon interesting homes that kind of catch my attention. And others I found on Google, and then I screenshot them, and then I mark their address, and I create a little route for myself.
Yeah.
So this one, when I found it, like from the 3D view, it just looked so weird because like the ivy renders in a weird way. So I just saw this row home that looked very peculiar, and I go down to Street View and I saw the ivy, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I really hope that this ivy is still there. Because sometimes on Google even I'll find a house and I get there and it's demolished, like the house isn't even standing anymore, or maybe I'd get there and the ivy isn't there, whatever the case may be. But I found it, and like right away got so excited because I just think it's so incredibly cool and so unique in the collection. So I biked out, found it. Interestingly too, there was a car parked right in front of it. This car was composited in, because it like complements the house with the color and the old school style. But originally there was like a shitty car. By shitty, I mean like newer, actually. Newer cars are just less photogenic to me. And luckily I just waited for a second, and the next door neighbors came out of their house and just so happened to drive out and leave the house, open to photograph, which was wonderful. And I talked to them for a little bit about the history of the house, and they just said it's been abandoned for as long as they've lived there, for over 15 years, I think. Wow. And I don't know, they saw what I saw in it too. They're like, yeah, it's pretty cool looking. Like you don't see row home like that too often. So it was cool to talk to someone who lives, right next door to it.
Yeah. So is this how it essentially was left? Like this amount of like vines and moss? Like I'm not sure what to call it. Like on the building.
Yeah. On the building itself, that's what it looks like.
Wow,
and there aren't
crazy.
any row homes on either side of it too. But the surroundings are always composited. So like this street might be a different like road texture than is actually there, and the sidewalk and the bushes on the sides. I definitely take a lot of creative liberties. So the house itself is like as it is, but the environment is all kind of constructed to work with the house.
It looks amazing. Like honestly, like it's very unique as well. Like so many projects are, we're gonna do a land sale or profile picture or like generative. I think coming from this direction, it's really true to yourself as well. Like you're very passionate about this, obviously, and it's very unique. I think very like out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm excited for Highrises too, because I was born in New York City, so I'd love to get a high rise. That if you're able to compile something from New York City. Grew up in St. Louis. Now I live in Denver. So if you like, I could see people also wanting to collect the high rises from cities they've lived in. Like that's something that I want to do. Just
Yeah.
hearing you talk about this now. So if you do stop in St. Louis or Denver and you compile some there, I will hop on and try to get those. Is there a high rise in your collection that we can pull up that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, you could maybe pull up number 20. And I agree. That's something I'm really excited for with the high rises. These row homes are, I doubt that anyone has any specific connection to one of these row homes. It's more about the general idea of Philadelphia neighborhoods that people can resonate with. But with the high rises, each one of these buildings has a big community around it, between the people that designed it and built it to the people that live in it, people that renovated it, 50 years later. People whose like mom worked at this building and they went in every Monday to see their office and see the view out the window or whatever. But yeah, they have the opportunity to have much more personal connections, which is very exciting. And the geographic reach, it's not just Philadelphia, it's the whole United States. So the audience is much bigger for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so this is high rise number 20.
Yeah.
Where was this one taken?
I mean, I could talk about all of them, but this one was special to me for a couple of reasons. It's in Baltimore, Maryland, and I've been to Baltimore before, but for some reason, when you're not looking at the world through this lens of trying to find these historic high rises to capture, I didn't even notice it. I don't even remember seeing this building, when I was going through Baltimore in the past. And when I found it, I was looking on Google Earth and looking at Baltimore, and I was like, oh my God, Baltimore has a building like that? Really? Just because it's so unique and like incredibly beautiful with this gilded gold roof. It reminds me of like the Great Gatsby, the Gilded Era, where people were just trying to make things as extravagant as possible. And if you can zoom in at all, not sure if you can, but there's like kind of midway up, kind of a little lower than midway.
I can't really zoom in on OpenSea, unfortunately.
No, there are these eagle sculptures up there, which from the street you cannot see at all. So it's just super cool to see details like that. Like obviously they really cared, and just a fascinating building.
I think these also translate really well to once we have better like digital frames that you can hang on your wall and rotate your NFTs through. Like I could definitely see these being something that people want to display. But yeah, the detailing is really great in these. Dan, sorry I cut you off there. What were you gonna say?
No worries. Yeah, because coming from the Netherlands, we don't have these types of buildings. Like the closest building I know is like this like small church building, and it's tiny. Like because my entire country is flat. It's so it's pretty amazing to see like all these incredibly large buildings.
It's a good point too, because high rises, these types of old high rises, are very uniquely in the United States and a little bit in Canada. The reason being, when elevators were invented, they allowed for taller buildings. Most European cities were already so dense, and they also didn't like the idea. They looked at America and like scoffed at these like atrocious big monuments to capitalism, basically. And then it wasn't until modernism and like cheaper buildings and steel frame with glass skin that skyscrapers really made it over to Europe. So most of the taller buildings in Europe now are more modern, and I think there was just maybe in materials too, there was something unique about like our access to labor and stone, but I think it was more cultural, that they just didn't like the idea of these big high rises. So interesting that it's unique to America.
Definitely, yeah.
Very cool. So, on your website as well, it talks about your bike journey across the U.S. Let's dive into that a little bit, because there's some really great pictures there. I live in Colorado, like I said, so I saw like some of the stuff from Monarch Pass. So, the picture you had on top of one of the gondolas. So, tell us a little bit about that trip. What some of your favorite spots were, what you learned along the way, and just dive into it.
Yeah, for sure. It was an incredible trip, and the friends I took that trip with were all itching to get back on the road to some capacity, because life is just better, simpler when you're just on the road.
It really is.
And pitch your tent. It's a good time. But that was summer of 2020. So we had it planned for a couple of years, and then COVID happened, and we were like, are we still going to do this? And we were like, yeah, I mean, why not? Like, we'll be outside most of the time and relatively separated. And like, we just we didn't want to let these dreams die. So COVID didn't affect it too much, honestly. Like we were a little scared about like maybe some gas stations or rest stops might be closed and then we wouldn't be able to get water or food, which could have been bad, but everything worked out. But yeah, it was a 84-day trip. It took us 84 days to get from Philadelphia to San Francisco and a little bit over 4,000 miles traveled. And we just had tents and all the gear we needed on the backs of our bikes. So unsupported. And had a ton of adventures along the way.
Anything, any particular stories you care to share? It doesn't need to be anything too crazy. I don't want anything incriminating here, but
no, we didn't do anything too bad out there. There's almost too many to even choose. But one interesting one, we were in Murfreesboro, Illinois, and we ended the day. We got into this town, Murfreesboro. And like on several occasions, people warned us about this storm. Like when you have a packed up bike, everyone you meet, like they see the bike and they say, "Oh, where are you headed to? Like, what's going on? What are you doing?" So we had several conversations. They're like, "Where are you sleeping tonight? Like, there's going to be a big storm. Like, there might be a tornado."
Wow.
We're like, "Oh, we're just going to pitch our tents outside of a church or something. We'll figure it out." So we did not heed any of their warnings, and the sun was starting to set, the sky was starting to get cloudier and cloudier, and like it's scary out, like when it gets super flat, like in the Great Plains, you can see for miles and miles. So like you can see this big like circular wall of storm cloud coming towards us. And we just went to this state park because we heard there was a pavilion. Not a great shelter, but something. So we got there, and then like a legitimate tornado siren started going off in the state park, like a very ominous, like low siren, and all our phones went off like tornado warning, tornado watch. And there wasn't really anything we could do. Like we just hunkered down in this like cinder block bathroom facility that they had, just a little tiny cinder block bathroom next to the pavilion. So that was very scary. I don't think a tornado touched down. But just like the strongest winds and heaviest rain that I've probably ever experienced. And we're like, all four of us were just in a little bathroom, and it was dark, and like water was like flooding into the bathroom, and we were just kind of laughing because there's nothing you can really do in that situation. I was like standing in the door frame because I figured if like a tree fell, it might collapse the roof, but the door frame would be the safest spot to be. So that was crazy. We had several storm experiences in Kansas too. We got hit with some big storms where like, if you're just out on the open road and a storm rolls in, like you just have to lay in the ditch on the shoulder of the road and like put your bike above you and like just hunker down.
Growing up in Missouri, like, you got used to the tornado sirens, and I think I watched the movie Twister at too young of an age, so that they always scared the crap out of me. But yeah, Kansas is so flat that if you get stuck in the wrong place at the wrong time, it can get bad in a hurry.
Yeah, it's scary.
So I see the picture of the arch. So I know you guys stopped in St. Louis just on the site, looking through this and everything. What were, are there a few, if people are going to go to your website and check some of them out, obviously want to look at everything. Any particular highlights? Like this picture from Utah looks really cool. What were some of your favorite photographs from that trip?
Yeah, I think a good place to start is at the end of the trip, the most recent blog post is like a photo gallery. So I composited just collected all of my favorite photos from the whole trip. So that's a great overview. And then if there are certain like sections that you're curious about, I have blog posts for each week of the journey. So I have posts as we were working our way through the Rocky Mountains. We experienced awful wildfires in 2020 summer. Like it seems like every year they're the worst that's ever happened. But we literally biked through smoke and raining ash for the final week of the trip.
Wow.
So yeah, all the different regions, can be found on the blog. So if you're curious about what it was like to go through the Great Plains or Appalachia, it's all there.
So did you share these blog posts like while you were on the road?
Yeah.
Or did you share them afterwards?
Yeah, I brought my iPad and I had my DSLR. so I could edit
Mm-hmm.
photos on the road. And I would, each week we had a rest day, and I would just sit in a cafe and write all day. It was tedious and hard, especially when my friends were out like relaxing and having fun, and I was
Yeah.
like just working all day.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad that I like, archived these experiences.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of comments on your blog post. Did they like motivate you? Did they like affect you in any way?
Yeah, it was incredible. Just mainly through Instagram, I was sharing on my stories,
Mm-hmm.
as well as Instagram posts, just the whole journey. And I talked to a lot of people after the fact, and a lot of people donated to us even.
Wow.
People that were locked down through COVID that were just living vicariously through our
Yeah.
like wild trip across the country, and it gave some people something to look forward to and something to keep track of. So the positive feedback, I mean, yeah, it was definitely encouraging.
That's awesome. It's really, really cool. Dan, anything else there that you want to talk about? Any other questions you
Um.
got?
Well, the only thing I'm wondering is like, do you think it affected your life like as a whole, like the whole trip? Because it's a pretty grand like undertaking.
Yeah, yeah, we talked a lot through the trip just about
Yeah.
what it means and just what we were doing, because on surface level it's like when you break it down, it's not that complicated. You're just biking, and I think what's great about it is mix, daily physical activity with great sunshine and getting vitamin D and being with good friends and being away from the daily stressors of
Mm-hmm.
like your work and people that you are responsible for, whatever it might be. You're just away from all of that. Life gets super super simple. But to me, I think the biggest takeaway that sounds cliche, but is definitely a learning lesson. When you see the whole trip, it seems so daunting. Like, how do you bike from Philadelphia to San Francisco? Like,
Yeah.
that's a pretty far away. But when you break it down and just day by day, you just like take a little chunk at a time, you can accomplish big things. So, I mean, I've always had that mindset. Um, and I think that applies to everything now. Like the Highrises project, I had this nugget of an idea,
Yeah.
and now just one step at a time, building the team, putting in the work, traveling out to these different places to build something that I hope in a year or two is the biggest thing I've ever done. And it's just step by step.
Yeah. It's very good advice, and it's funny because like high rises, like they're very like large buildings, right? So it's interesting that you give like this analogy of like taking it one step at a time, because it is like a very big undertaking. Like it's a huge building, right? So.
Yeah, well, huge building, and then just the travel, compared to
Mm-hmm.
row homes where I could ride my bike. Now
True.
I,
Yeah.
I need
Yeah.
to book rental cars and book flights and hotels and plan it
Yeah.
all out. So yeah, it's a
Yeah.
large undertaking for sure.
Yeah, it's very easy for me to forget how large the United States is. As like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
as a Dutchman, like you guys have to fly to just go to like another city, right? Like it's very unheard of for me,
yeah.
because everything is like an hour or two away from where I am. So
Hmm.
Well, awesome. I think that's a great nugget to leave things on for today. Outside of high rises, is there anything else you want to share, with people watching before we head out of here, Chris?
High rise is the main thing. That's what I'm like working full time on for
hmm
at least the rest of this year, and what I'm most excited for. So yeah, if you have a minute to check out that website, I hope you can link that somewhere. I think it's
Absolutely.
highrises.hythacg.com. So yeah, check that out for more information.
Well, very cool. I'll be keeping an eye out for, as more of these come out and you travel more, and hopefully if you make it to Denver or St. Louis, I'll be looking to pick one of those up. So thank you so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate it. This was a great conversation, and rooting for you. And I hope that this project continues to grow and develop and become great.
Hmm. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right,
for
everybody.
sure.
Thank you very much for watching today. Please like the stream, subscribe to the FLOLiO channel. Head over to FLOLiO.com to check out all of the tools that we have for managing your NFT portfolio. And we'll be back on Friday to talk more NFTs. Until then, have a great day. Take it easy.
Bye bye.